So, at the risk of repeating myself, if you were here last week or tuning in to our YouTube channel, much is still being made of the contrast between the behaviour of Her Majesty the Queen over the last year or so and the behaviour of her Prime Minister and his staff. I'm not going to labour it, but it's still rumbling on. And basically, it is the difference between self-sacrifice on the one hand and self-indulgence on the other. Two very different attitudes, two very different approaches to life. And in our gospel reading today, it's something very similar to those two very different approaches to life, self-sacrifice on the one hand and self-indulgence on the other, that Jesus is teaching about in Luke's version of what is commonly called the Beatitudes. Let's take a closer look. So, if we read the beginning of Luke chapter 6, Jesus comes down from a mountaintop where he had been praying and also where he had been choosing his 12 apostles. And further down the mountain, Jesus stands in a level place with all of his followers and also with a great crowd of people from all over the region seeking his wisdom and his healing. And he looks his disciples in the eye. So this is about his disciples. It's not about the crowd. This is about his disciples. And he begins to teach in the following way. And this is my paraphrase. If you are serious about following me, you're going to be poor. You're going to be hungry. You're going to weep. And you're going to be persecuted. But you will be happy and fulfilled. Literally, you will be blessed. And then he teaches, if you want to follow me, but want to be rich or satisfied or have a life of laughter or popularity, then heaven help you. Or literally, woe to you. I don't know about you, but what I like about these words and about many other challenging words that Jesus says, especially in Luke's gospel, is Jesus' honesty. Jesus wants people to be absolutely clear about the kind of lifestyle he is inviting his followers to lead. And this is a lifestyle of self-sacrifice rather than self-indulgence. But paradoxically, that lifestyle of self-sacrifice will lead, Jesus teaches, to ultimate happiness. So blessed are the poor. If we're serious about following Jesus, we will no longer just invest in ourselves. We will no longer just invest maybe in the closest people around us. We will begin to invest seriously in the lives of many other people. We will begin to invest in terms of our money, our time, our energy, our prayers. And we are going to invest, says Jesus, to the point where it is going to hurt. Don't forget those original apostles and disciples. They left their day jobs behind. They left their livelihoods behind to follow Jesus. And Christian history is littered with examples of people who have done the same, who have left riches and wealth and security and a good career maybe. They've left all of those things behind to follow Jesus. I sometimes wonder what I would be doing if I wasn't an ordained minister in the Church of England, I'd probably have a very cushy job in the Foreign Office. That was my original career path. But this isn't just about people who are ordained. It's about everyone. Jesus is saying to everyone, if you're going to take me seriously and take following me seriously, then to some measure, you are going to impoverish yourselves. And he wants people to be under no illusion of that fact. Similarly, he says, blessed are the hungry. You are going to be hungry. You are going to go hungry. And again, thinking of those original apostles and disciples, I'm sure they skipped many a meal. I'm sure they skipped many a lunch or tea or supper or breakfast or even second breakfast, as they basically became itinerant preachers and healers around Galilee and beyond. I mean, basically they were living a lifestyle not dissimilar to the homeless people that we come across in our city today. And often they went hungry. And yes, I've gone hungry in the service of the kingdom. And there were people here yesterday morning and afternoon going hungry in the service of the kingdom. I'll say more about you in a minute. We skipped lunch and we carried on doing the jobs that we had to do. So again, Jesus wants people to be clear. If you're following me for a full stomach, Jesus says, well, think again. Blessed are those who are weak. Blessed are those who weep. I forgot to say the poverty bit and the hunger bit. Yes, Luke emphasizes the literal sense of poverty and hunger, but of course there is a spiritual sense to those two things as well. Matthew emphasizes that. His version is, blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are those who hunger for thirst or righteousness. So there is a kind of a spiritual dimension to our poverty and our hunger as well, because if we're being serious about the poverty thing, that means we will end up depending a lot more on each other and on God. So that is, in a sense, about a poverty of spirit. We're no longer kind of self-determining. We're no longer in control of our own lives to some extent. We must rely more on other people. And spiritual hunger, hungering for thirst and righteousness, hungering for a better world, for a fairer world. That is part of the deal too. Okay, let's go on to weeping. Blessed are those who weep. I think there's something about being a serious disciple of Jesus that means we become especially exposed to the darkness and the brokenness of the world. And we will weep. Think again of those original apostles and disciples. They were taken into some pretty tough places as they accompanied Jesus. They were taken to the margins of their society, to those who were ill, to those who were demon-possessed, to those who were cast out by normal society because of their impurity, their ritual impurity. And Jesus spent a lot of time with these kind of people. And so they would have become acutely aware, maybe more than ever before, of the darkness and the brokenness of the world. And this put me in mind of a line from our healing service. If you ever come to our healing services on the fifth Sunday of the month in the evening, we use the Iona community healing liturgy, and there's a lovely line in it. It's an invitation to come and be healed. So it says, come you who are burdened by regrets and anxieties, come you who are broken in body or in spirit. And then it says, come you who feel deeply within yourselves the divisions and injustices of our world. That's what Jesus is on about, I think, when he says you're going to weep. If you follow me, you're going to weep. You're no longer going to be insulated from the really tough and horrible and nasty bits of the world that are out there, because that's where Jesus goes. Jesus doesn't stay in the safe waters. So you're going to weep. It's going to be tough. There are going to be some tearful times. Finally, you're going to be persecuted. Then and now, just as Jesus made himself so unpopular with the powers that be, so Jesus' followers have and will continue to make themselves unpopular, because their lifestyle, says Jesus, is going to be so contrary to the lifestyle advocated by the so-called rich and powerful and successful. And yes, last time I looked, which was yesterday, Christianity is still the most persecuted religion in the world today. So to recap, Jesus is saying, if you're serious about following me, Jesus says to his followers then and now, you're going to be poor to some extent, you're going to be hungry, you're going to weep, and you're going to be unpopular, excluded. But you will be happy. You will be blessed. What did Jesus mean by this? Well, I think we had a little taste of this yesterday morning. It's a little example, but it's not an insignificant one. If you were here yesterday morning, it was a hive of activity, and there was a real buzz about the place. So some people had turned up to work away in the churchyard, and God bless them, because it started raining pretty soon after 11 o'clock, but some of them persevered in the rain, and they picked up all the kind of detritus that falls down regularly from the trees and all of that. So they'd come along, and then there was a whole other bunch of people who'd come along to sort through the donations that have been given over the weeks and months for Afghan refugees and for other causes. You'll see the fruit of our labour in the corner there, all the bags nicely tied up and labelled now, and hopefully they'll be going off to the right destinations. But again, a whole bunch of people had come to sacrifice their time and their energy and their goodwill to do a pretty mundane task, but it needed doing. And of course, those donations themselves were a sacrifice. To some extent, people had made a sacrifice in making those donations in the first place. A sacrifice of money or time or energy for them as well. And then we had a bunch of people turn up from Didsbury, the ringers from Didsbury, to do more maintenance on our bells, and so that our bells can keep ringing. And, they come free of charge. Again, they've given up their Saturday mornings, and they do some repairs and maintenance free of charge. And I just think that's wonderful. It's so humbling. And they're not even, Didsbury aren't even in our mission community, but still they come. And there was a moment where I just stood back, and there was all this kind of hubbub going on, and I just thought, this is wonderful. This is just a little taste of the kingdom. And it's just a little taste of what I think Jesus is saying. There was a happiness in the air. There was a blessedness in the air because of all the sacrifice that was being made. And yes, it's not a big example, but I don't think it's an insignificant one either. And for all of you who turned up yesterday morning, and I know some of you couldn't be there for good reasons, but for those of you who were there, God bless you. And Jesus says to you, God bless you, and may heaven bless you. And there was that kind of happiness. There is a happiness in sacrifice. So I think we know what Jesus means. We know what Jesus means in our own experience. When we take sacrifice seriously, we do find that nugget of happiness and fulfillment, and that sense of, yes, this is what life is supposed to be about. The converse is, if we spend our whole lives just looking after number one, we know, don't we? We know that we will very quickly be quite miserable. We know this. We know this in our own experience. So in a sense, Jesus is not saying anything surprising, but what he's saying to his disciples is, yes, life bring sacrifices of all kinds. But actually, as my disciple, your lifestyle is going to be about choosing sacrifice often. And you need to be prepared for that. But it will bring you an extraordinary joy and happiness and fulfillment. So that's the message of Jesus. But the question is, how faithful generally is the modern church to this original message of Jesus? Because I don't see this. I don't see this on our fancy websites and posters and bulletins and flyers. I don't see this message being sold very much. The Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson, who is quite a phenomenon and has been really for about 5 years now, who for several years has been packing out theatres and even bigger venues, even the O2, with young people. Yes, young people. You know, those people that we don't often see in church. He's been packing out theatres and arenas with young people to come and listen to lectures, sometimes 2.5 hours long, on the psychological significance of the Bible. Often to full houses. Now, there's something going on there. There's something that maybe the church is missing. And this is what Jordan Peterson argues. He argues that Jesus, in this teaching and in much of his teaching, he is essentially calling each and every one of us on what is sometimes called the hero's journey. Jesus is calling each and every one of us on the hero's journey. A journey, yes, of great sacrifice, but also of rich reward. And we're used to the hero's journey. It's in our culture all the time. It's in so many of our films. And it's what excites us, the hero's journey. It's in many of the greatest stories that we enjoy. The books that we read, the films that we watch, the plays that we go and see, the hero's journey. And a criticism that Jordan Peterson makes of the church, even though he and his family have strong Christian connections, is that the modern church is losing a lot of young people precisely because we're not making enough of that invitation to that hero's journey that was so often on the lips of Jesus himself. We're not making enough of that challenge on Jesus' lips. Come and be challenged. Come and live that life of sacrifice, which is going to be tough, but will ultimately fulfill you and be ultimately satisfying and bring you ultimate meaning. I wonder whether too often we are softening that invitation, or we try and make it attractive in some way, or we try and make it, God forbid, this word that I try and exclude from my vocabulary when it comes to church. We try and make it relevant. When we reread Jesus' teaching in Luke chapter 6, I would say very little of it is either attractive or relevant to this or to any age. And I believe we live in a generation where people are desperately searching for more meaning and purpose in their lives. And yes, even more challenge. And when people are given a challenge, they take it up. We only need to look at the most popular TV programs at the moment, the most popular reality shows. They're all about people taking up these extraordinary challenges in their lives. And many people, especially young people, they're now beginning to see through that materialistic and often highly self-indulgent lifestyle that has been sold to us, I would say, over the last few decades by our advertisers and, yes, sadly, by some of our politicians, Mrs. T. And they're now looking for greater depth. They're looking for greater authenticity. They're looking for greater connection. Because the world has changed. We're no longer living in the 1980s or 1990s. The world has moved on. And there's a younger generation that's making that search for an authentic lifestyle, because they've seen through the chimera, if you like, the phantom life that maybe the generation above them has been living or has been offering to them. So may Christ give us and all his church fresh grace to be more faithful to his original teaching in word and in deed. And may we not be afraid of either making that heroic Christ-like journey ourselves in our lives, or inviting others to make that heroic Christ-like journey in theirs. A journey that, yes, brings many trials, but which also will bring true fulfillment. Amen.